Hi, and welcome to another episode of Great Conversations. Today, I'm very happy to greet, which I think is our very first guest from outside of the WordPress ecosystem. Here with me today is Dr. Kurze, a technical B2B pre-sales leader and angel investor working at the intersection of engineering, sales, and founder-led growth. Christian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me today.
Those of you who are following us, and especially our CEO Mark's channels, know that we love to talk about sales, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. Today's topic is not only relevant to agencies looking to differentiate, but also to product teams and even established firms. We are going to discuss today how to build sales that actually scale. But before we dive into today's topic, Christian, would you please let our viewers know a little bit about yourself? What's your background and what do you do today?
Yeah, sure. So I started to develop software quite a while ago. I was still at school and founded my first freelance gig at age 18. And fun fact, so I mainly built websites back in those days, in addition to some software. So kind of closing the loop today. Later on, I founded, based on my PhD research at university, I also worked in several startups as an early employee. And back in 2017, I joined MongoDB, which was already known for their sales excellence back in those days. And yeah, I got a chance, an opportunity to see hands-on how to build a strong commercial open source play. And then since 2022, I also actively investing as an angel investor and have the pleasure to work very closely with multiple technical founders.
Oh, so it sounds like you work with both experienced companies at very different stages. So bootstrap startups, funded scale-ups, established SMBs. Is the sales topic different depending on where you are?
Yeah, so I would say the symptoms look very different, but the root cause is always the very same or very similar architectural problem. A bootstrap founder relies on gut feeling, random wins, whereas a funded startup usually starts to hire sales a bit too early and starts to push for volume and unfortunately scales noise instead of actual revenue. And even if you're an established company, yeah, you have a CRM, you have reporting, you have all that stuff in place, but growth some kind of plateaus because the foundation, how to scale, was never truly engineered. So different stages, I would say, but same missing architectural core piece.
Yeah, I think that's also something that we often see in WordPress. So, as you know, our audience is mainly active in the WordPress ecosystem. And while there are many things special about this bubble, one thing in particular is that hardly any plugin or product company has dedicated sales teams or even real sales systems. And it's very similar for agencies. Most of their projects come from inbound or through referrals. And for years, this has been just fine. I mean, the market was hot. There was a huge demand for websites, for digital products. The pandemic has led to even higher demand for that. Um, but we see a change here nowadays. When we open our social media, we see posts about mass layoffs. We see agencies struggling and shutting down their business. We see product companies missing growth targets and having difficulties to find funding. Why is that? What has changed that makes sales such an urgency now?
Yeah, so I would say as we all know, the whole economy has changed, yeah? And with that, also how buyers and also investors take their decisions. That's so with all these AI companies around, so getting money now requires way more traction, way more revenue in very early phases of companies. And also with these arrivals of ChatGPT, LLMs, AI for everyone. So buyers usually come very, very informed nowadays, get very skeptical and also super risk averse. And everyone works on the fact to extend their runways as companies. And so this whole AI, um, I don't want to call it a bubble, this AI theme, right, has compressed the education, due diligence phases, and also raised the bar very high for clarity and proof of value on your side as a product company, and also especially for an agency, right? A lot of people think, oh, let's just write a prompt for that. Why do I need an agency? Why do I need a new product?
And I think this is actually a real big problem for our industry. It's not that we don't have good products or services, but like I said, the majority of WordPress companies really lacks sales expertise. And Christian, you mentioned a couple of stations in your track record. I suppose having worked for and with tech startups, you've seen firsthand what happens when great products are built without strong sales expertise, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I experienced this on my very own, being a first-time founder right out of university. So we had a research-backed product for global competitors back in these days. So that sounds super good, right? But we also had some initial projects of obviously a product, some initial projects around it. But looking back, I honestly did not have a real clue, right, about educating the market, doing real outbound campaigns, building and executing a real sales or go-to-market motion. And I'm very honest to myself. I was relying on a bit of hope, and that some magic happens. Then after that, part of multiple early stage companies in multiple different roles, right? In pre-sales roles, in product management roles. And unfortunately, I've seen horrible results of not making the numbers, feeling myself close to burnout, but also seeing founders even going to court against each other, fighting for the money they invested, and feeling all this emotion and stress around it. Working long night shifts, all that stuff. Yeah. So, and on the other hand, I also experienced these huge rewards when you're able to get a new big customer on board at this feeling of, wow, we made it. Yeah, we did it. Cool. And then when I got the chance to join MongoDB, I did not hesitate, right? I clearly said yes, because they were growing so fast. And I thought to myself, they must have found kind of a secret sauce. So, how can you actually sell something that you can download for free on the internet? Right? So I've worked a lot with open source software, but it was never clear to me how can you build a business around an open source product. And that's what I've seen firsthand for 6 years there. When we grown Central and Eastern Europe from about 1 million of revenue to some solid double-digit millions of revenue per year. And during this time, I was especially lucky. And why? Because during that time, the company started to really rethink the sales approach. Started with a very strong process and milestones along this process. Very hard qualification of deals, as a GPS system navigating along the sales process. And what I would like to say is excellence at an almost maniacal level of attention to detail. And that was always driven by one key thing. How can we ensure that we are chosen in an evaluation process without losing to other competitors? And think of it, right? It's selling a database. So there are, I think we even crossed the 1,000 mark of databases out there in total. And so, and if you think of it as kind of a boring topic, um, so we had to get on top of this noise with the open source motion. It was very helpful. And second part is we must not lose against ourselves, as an open source product, which is to my mind, a very similar challenge also in the WordPress community. Everyone can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what I'm hearing is that bottom line is if you want to succeed, especially in today's market, there really is no way around anymore around professional sales. And you mentioned a couple of things. So what companies need is a repeatable sales engine, structured discovery, qualification processes, CRM workflows, consistent execution. So, I mean, while that is, or at least should be standard in large companies and hyperscalers like MongoDB, it might seem very overwhelming to many of our listeners who work in smaller product companies or in agencies. And even if you're talking about companies who are already doing active sales, from my experience, this is always the part where most product companies fail. I mean, they have great products, but they really don't know how to sell them. I know that you've been working on a very interesting project over the last years and months, the ACT Playbook, which we at Greyd also use. And from what I understand, it approaches sales the way an engineer would approach building a system. Could you explain that way of thinking?
Yeah, sure. And so this acronym ACT actually stands for align on value, create the engine, and trigger scale. With the most important thing in the acronym itself, right? Do it. So no matter which frameworks you're using, you need to do it. You need to get started and execute it. And this was heavily inspired by one of the former sales leaders I was allowed to work with, who always said success can only happen if you do things. So let's dig a bit deeper. What is this? What is this ACT playbook? So it's a framework that approaches sales, as you said it, the way like a founder or an engineer would approach building a system. So the basis are the well-proven playbooks of these hyperscalers that are broken down to earlier stage and smaller companies. Now, you can't simply adopt something that works in a public company with thousands of people globally to a 10-person agency, right? Or a even smaller, earlier stage startup. So, and I used this exact framework, and this is how I adopted it. I love companies that I was with after leaving MongoDB, and also a few of my portfolio companies, coming to a very practical go-to-market framework for B2B tech companies, like agencies, product companies, or hybrid businesses that sell products but also sell services around it, or use services to get into the customer to actually position the product. So multiple ways to, or multiple angles to get into the customers here. And at its core, and this is what most people unfortunately skip, is the value architecture, right? And this helps the teams to really clearly define your target customer profiles, the different stakeholder roles, how the buy committees look like, and the value drivers that actually drive decisions in the target companies, in your prospects and customers, and how these product capabilities that you offer translate into real measurable outcomes. And this approach helps companies to systematically work on the value prop and figure out which combination offer make the offer really unique. And therefore, you can start to influence which capabilities should make it into an evaluation process very early on, right? And around this value architecture, then we use a lot of templates to come up with your sales playbook in a very practical, repeatable system. And these templates are there for early stage companies so that you can quickly find and evaluate your product market fit, but also later stage companies that either need to scale the sales, or companies that need to overcome this invisible ceiling of scaling issues. And usually companies start with more people as an answer. We need more feet on the ground, so automatically our revenue will grow. But this unfortunately does not solve the problem if you don't align on your core product values and how you speak about your product first, right? And I've seen it many times, so that companies hire VP sales very early on, especially here in Europe. We have very common thread. Let's hire VP sales and they will do the thing for us. They know how to do their thing, and they absolutely know how to do their thing. Otherwise, you would not have hired them. But you, as the owner of the company, as a founder, need to provide them with very clear guidance, right? How these first or later sales hires have to work. They must understand the product. They need to understand how to talk about the product, how to do good discovery. So simply what works and what doesn't work, right? Otherwise, you're overwhelmed by their strong opinions, or they invent their own stories about your product, right? Which are then not true and obviously will not sell. So now you imagine you build this complete foundation and can just plug in someone that knows how to execute in a perfect way. So this will be kind of plug and play then for scaling.
I think the one of the things that you mentioned is especially interesting. I mean, I suppose most of our listeners agree on the part about, okay, we need to work on sales playbooks and we need processes and all these kind of things. But you also mentioned that a core part of this value framework is like really down to the smallest detail, defining who your ideal customers are and what kind of personas the stakeholders are involved. Um, I could imagine that a lot of our listeners today might think, okay, but why spend time on that? Shouldn't we know whom we sell to and what we have to offer? Shouldn't we focus on like the actual sales part?
Um, very valid objection. And I see this so often, right? And many people think they have defined a clear ICP, but when you boil it down, you realize they didn't. Yeah. And it's simply proven by the fact that it's not written down somewhere. Yeah. Or you cannot translate it into a target account list. Give me the 200 accounts that fit this ICP or this customer profile. Yeah. Or another extreme is they try to target everyone. Yeah. We have a horizontal solution that can be used by any industry, by anyone out there, which de facto means you're targeting no one. Yeah, so having multiple target customer profiles is not an issue at all, right? It's even quite common, especially if you're in later stages. Um, but you still need a clear understanding who they are, what they care about, which capabilities you're offering to solve the pain, and how to go into exactly this target customer segment, right? And especially in B2B sales, there are always several personas and people involved in the buying process, yeah, and they have individual pains and goals, yeah, that need to be addressed in the proper language at the proper time of the buying cycle. Yeah, you simply speak in a very different language to an executive decision maker versus a developer, or a designer in the WordPress or a website content. And many people, including myself, a couple of years back, need to understand that features are not same as delivered value, right? Especially European tech companies and product people, they tend to sell features because we are so proud of our product. And most likely it's a very cool product and a very good product that you build. But we need to translate this into business outcomes, right? And this value gap that you're defining and that you're really peeling out there is the right to charge your customer. Yeah? Without this value gap, why should someone pay some money for your product or your service, right?
I'm smiling because we found ourselves in exactly the position and the situation you just described, like trying to sell to everybody and then ending up with messaging that kind of reaches no one, pricing that doesn't really fit to anyone. So I can fully support what you've just shared. Many of you might know that we at Greyd have the great opportunity to take part in the German Accelerator, which is a government program for market expansion, in our case, US market. And in the first phase, for the first couple of months, that was actually all about this, like finding out who our ideal customer profiles are and what personas they have, what their pains are, what their challenges are, what Greyd.Suite can do for them. And this turned out not only to be way more difficult than we anticipated, but this was really for us, it was the key to success. Uh, so we can really recommend working on that and really spend time on that because it's so important. Whom would you suggest to involve in that process of like defining and working on the value framework? Because from my experience, these kind of topics are often handled on a management or also marketing level, completely independent from the rest of the team who might be completely oblivious of it.
Yeah, yeah. And first and foremost, I think it's super important that you get top management attention. Yeah, if your CEO or your founder does not buy in to these ideas and drives the initiative, you're already prone to fail. Yeah, because as you said, it's usually handled from a managing or marketing level, but you do need a lot more people because you need to achieve a way bigger goal, right? You are aligning your whole company on using the same language about your customers, about your product, about your whole go-to-market approach. And then you need to start to work on understanding your product in detail as well. It's not just your customers, but also your product first and foremost. Formulate which capabilities you have. And by the way, these capabilities can be features of the product, Yeah. But it can also be some kind of consulting services, onboarding, support levels, migration services, etc. So the capabilities you are offering to the market. And for all these capabilities, you define how you do it, how you're doing it better than the others out there, which metrics can prove the impact on a technical and the business level, and also some good proof points where you actually did it. Yeah. And that is then usually a cycle in combination with defining customer profiles, personas, which is, as you said, not easy. And there will always be different takes on it. Inside and outside of your company, you ask 5 people, you get 10 opinions at least. Um, but there are also many helpers available to do this learning cycle, and this evaluation cycle. So use a good structure that, for example, we defined in the ACT Playbook, and then use your favorite AI, ChatGPT, and I highly recommend to work with multiple AIs here, right? Give the results to the other AI, to Google, to Claude, back to ChatGPT, and let them discuss these ideas with each other. And um, yeah, so but this can help you identify these company profiles, really nailing down the problem, and really nailing down the way you're also talking about your key capabilities. And what is super important, that it's not just you think about it, but you discovered a lot of your early customers or your existing customers or the product research you did, right? Profile your customers, extract as much information as possible about the real pain from every single conversations, and why if you already have existing customers, and why they have chosen your solution here, not just on a technical level, but also what has improved in the company. Customers, more revenue, easier onboarding, less customer churn, right? So real tangible business metrics. And in order to make this whole value framework credible, you need this good language and business term, but you also must involve your product people, technical pre-sales, engineering, and in addition to all this customer-facing personnel, right? Because it's key that you don't come up with a story, but you come up with real pain points that you can solve and that your product can really solve, right? And obviously to involve the founders or the product brains of your company, right? Because they really understand the product vision and can articulate it best. And maybe you need to help them a little bit with AI helpers or with a good salesperson, right? To talk about the product in a different way.
And probably not just like use the information that you have about customers, but really involve them in that process also, and hear from them in person what their pains are and how they describe it, and how they use your product, because probably otherwise your value framework might end up just being another marketing document, right? With like feature lists and all this in your words.
Yeah. So never ever work in a vacuum or an ivory tower here, right? So every prospect, as I said, every customer interaction provides you with a lot of insights about your value drivers, which are, by the way, usually around 5 key topics that we need to cover. Some kind of regulation, where you might help people, accessibility on websites, for example. You can build competitive edge, super converting website when we think about WordPress ecosystem here. Risk and security. I don't want to get user data breached or want to mitigate some risks, maybe some investor relations page that I publish, right? It has to follow strict rules what I publish there. Obviously, productivity, cost, quality, how fast can I build websites sticking to WordPress again here, or how much quality improvement can I deliver with a support portal or whatever I create on my website. And obviously, reputation. Also super important, very hard to quantify a reputation. But if a website is constantly down, obviously you think, maybe I don't want to work with this company, right? I can't even reach the website. So as a general structure for all these value drivers, we're also discussing, you need to think about how prospects work today. So what is their as-is state, how they work, how it negatively affects their business. The website is constantly down, customers move away, and how an ideal state could look like. Obviously, super duper website, fast conversions, high conversion rates. And these were already the metrics, right, that would show the positive business impact here, more customers, more leads. And then the key capabilities come into account because they describe the way how you get from the current state into the future state. And you already thought about and constantly enrich the metrics that describe how you actually measure the success here on a technical level, on a business level. And you should not stop there because there is a lot more to add in terms of discovery questions and objection handling. How do your prospects, customers typically react when you talk about some capabilities? Are they resistant or are they accepted immediately? And what are good, challenging, trap-setting discovery questions to unveil pain in your customers that they might not even have thought about, and trap-setting in a way that you start to position features and capabilities that only you have, and automatically you kick your competitors out. That's what's meant with trap-setting discovery questions.
By the way, what we found super helpful to get all this information together and to put it all in this framework was to really analyze transcripts of all the calls that we did with customers, with leads. Those were like sales calls, those were demos, but also onboarding calls, customer relationship calls, support calls, like literally everything that we had and were allowed to use. And that really helped us, like making sure that we don't describe what we think is our customer's pain in our words, but really in their literal words. And also for the value drivers to not end up just be featureless, but really detailed descriptions of how we are solving our customers' challenges and how that's better than the alternatives. And again, not how we would describe that, but how our customers actually talk about it. And by the way, we've been talking about AI already. It's a perfect use case to let AI help you, because going through like thousands or hundreds of hours of call transcripts manually would take weeks. And for us, it was a couple of minutes, and AI was super helpful also to like structure all this information. And then you see super interesting things like, okay, if someone has like a technical background, they often highlight completely different things than people who are more design related or from a marketing perspective. And we found things in all those conversations that we haven't actually been aware of. So that was super interesting.
Especially the point that you mentioned, right? There was exceptional input that we were able to uncover. Also, very interesting details and phrases how prospects and customers actually talk about the product, right? And how they understand it. Maybe we talked about a feature and they rephrased it in a completely different way. Where I thought, hey, yeah, we need to change our talk track. Yeah, that's a way better approach so that people actually understand what we're talking about. It's also something I frequently hear. They don't get what we are talking about.
Yeah. Speaking about AI, at the moment you see so many AI-based go-to-market and sales automation tools coming out there. Can we just do we really have to spend the time on like manually like defining all this value framework? Can we just use one of these tools and just go for it and see what happens?
Yeah, and it's a very good question. And especially in my LinkedIn bubble, I get a lot of prompt packs and all these recommendations every single day, many of those. And all of them are great tools, right? And sales automation is definitely and obviously a very relevant step in the process of building your sales engine, with a big but, right? If you jump to execution and automation here, AI supported or not, that doesn't matter. You won't see the results you're hoping for. And why is that? Because you'll end up with very generic messaging or marketing copy. Yeah? If you're not able to tell the AI exactly who your ICPs, personas, pain points, key capabilities are, and how you are solving and actually proving that in a very detailed way, you will only scale the confusion, and revenue. And I mean, ask the AI generate an outreach email. you will get some very generic stuff. So basically, you go back to 2023 when all of us went to ChatGPT and said, "Oh, write me a poem in the style of Shakespeare," right? You get generic answers, but this has nothing to do with your product, right?
I can totally confirm that from our experience. I mean, when we started working on our value framework and listed our value drivers, we were like, oh yeah, we have global content, and global content is a super feature because it lets you synchronize assets across any number of sites. And that's great. And that was what we had on our website back then. But nobody's going to buy that because nobody has the pain or the actual need or desire to synchronize stuff. And then we really started working on our ICPs and personas, and the story completely changed because we identified, for example, that one of our ideal customer profiles are franchises and multi-location businesses with hundreds of websites. And we then looked at the different personas and what their individual challenges are. And there's, for example, in franchises, you have, for example, the marketing people who are responsible for rolling out campaigns to a high number of websites. And they probably struggle with that taking them weeks because they have to literally copy and paste this new pop-up or this new content to each and every one of their website, or they send out an email to all their franchisees to please do that on their individual websites. And some might do it, some might do it correctly, some might like change the copy they weren't supposed to change, some might not even read the email and don't publish anything at all. And why this is super relevant for someone working in marketing, a designer doesn't care about it. But a designer cares about constantly having to fix like broken layouts and designs when non-technical franchisees again tried to edit their opening hours on their own and accidentally messed up with the design. Then you have C-level, who at the same time is responsible for revenue, for financial KPIs, and they might be looking for ways to speed up the process of launching new website locations. Location websites. And tech teams, on the other hand, again, completely different challenges, probably more related to fragmented tech stacks and unstable environment security issues. So while global content solves all of the challenges that I just described, the messaging and the story and the way how we explain what global content is and what it can do for you is completely different, even within that one ICP. But for all these personas, it's a completely different story.
Yeah, and thank you for the summary. I could not have summarized in a better way how the journey can look like with the value framework. And I think it's a very good time to actually share and show what we created during this time.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So let's go here. So what underpins it, and what we mentioned multiple times now, is a good structure, right? Where to organize all this information. And it's important that you have this also actionable. Yeah, not just a fancy PowerPoint or a spreadsheet. You need to get this into real use. And where we started with the 4 customer profiles that Sandra mentioned, right? Where we say, let's open here the franchise multi-location companies, which was also filled with the help of AI. And there are also some AI helpers here in this software tool where you can actually chat with your value framework and go to the internet or just upload a presentation, extract stuff, and enrich the existing value framework, or take a call transcript and enrich what exists here. And as you can see, we went into a lot of details, right? What are some good examples? Not necessarily your customers, but examples that the AI understands. What are we talking about? What kind of companies? Industry sector, company size, geography, the typical firmographics, but also some psychographics, right? What's the culture? What are the values inside of these companies? How does the decision-making process, like, are they risk averse or more innovation appetite in these companies? And also, what drives these companies from a strategic perspective? What are their priorities? What are key change drivers? What do they want to achieve with your product, your tool? What are core pain points, key metrics? How do they do it today? So what are we competing against? Then we can attach additional case studies that we can also formulate in a very structured way, where we can say, let's take one of these franchises here. I say, what is the challenge? How did they solve it? What are results? What are good quotes, right? What are the involved personas that it relates to? What are the value drivers we are addressing in this case study? Key capabilities and a lot of metrics that are affected, right? And then taking this one step further to the individual personas, right? Where we say, and again, very detailed description, right? Looks like a lot of work, but with the help of AI, it's a matter of a few hours, right, to come up with the first iteration, and then it will improve over time, with every single customer interaction, as we said. And looking at this executive, right, they want to drive, for example, sustainable company growth, profitability, market expansion. And that's the way you need to talk to an executive leader. While when you talk to a designer, as Sandra exactly said, right, hey, they want to deliver visual, stunning, on-brand websites that strengthen the company's identity and user experience. Something completely different. Or a developer, because they want deliver a stable, high-performing website, with clean, maintainable code. You know? Let's have a look at this capability that Sandra described, to synchronize assets across any number of sites, which is the feature of global content. And here, intentionally in a vendor-neutral language, so that AI can talk about it, that you can compare it with your competitors, right? So the ability to synchronize these assets across any number of websites, centralized management of content, templates, and configurations. Yeah, how we do it, or how you do it in your product, how you do it better than the competitors. Why is that important? Again, metrics, how we measure the success, proof points where it has been used that we can reference, and also discovery questions and objection handling, as we discussed it before, in one single place where you can easily edit it. Oh, we figured out there's a new objection. Let's just put it here, and all of a sudden, your whole company can use it.
Yeah, or new features. So yeah.
New features. You're going to roll out the next version of your product, right? 5, 6 new features. Put it here. Everyone knows how to talk about it. You can start to generate website content, etc., etc. From this point here. And also implemented an MCP server so that you can use ChatGPT, Claude, to really talk to this value framework and use it in your day-to-day work, right? It's not an
Yeah, this is something that is super helpful, because this is also what I think, a way that if you have, we discussed like whom to involve in all these process and all these thinking, and then you have your value framework, and then you need like the entire company to actually work with that, and each marketing copy that is written should have that in mind. Each sales email that is written should have that in mind, and one way to make sure that everyone uses that is to just like put that in as a ground input for all your ChatGPT conversations, so that no matter what you do, no matter what you ask ChatGPT to do, ChatGPT knows all these information and uses that.
Yeah, and without losing yourself in so many different chat threads, right?
Yeah.
Weeks later, go back and
Super detailed.
my thread. Oh my god, my context is gone, and I need to start on scratch.
So, from what I understood, ACT here is like really a sequence. So we discussed now you architect the value. That's what we've seen here, what we've discussed so far. Then you build the engine, and only then do you really trigger execution. And I think just to come back to that point, because I think that's really important, and we see that a lot. Most companies get this backward, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you will use this framework, integrated in sales and marketing processes. And how to do this? First, you need to define clear steps and exit criteria for each milestone in your sales process. Yeah. And you also then need to reflect this process as a deal or opportunity stages in your CRM system, to really make it actionable. And also, you need to flag your companies, your contacts with the ICPs and personas that you defined. So this is an absolute necessary foundation to make it measurable, how efficient you are in converting your marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads, bring them to opportunity to close, and also into expansion. If you don't record this and create a single source of truth, aka your CRM system, how do you do this, right? So all this information will be lost, and this is very important information if you don't start to measure it. And if you don't measure it, you you can't improve it, right? And you don't see changes because you don't have the data. But it's not just the sales process and the qualification framework as a GPS system, as I said before, to navigate along this process. But you'll also prepare templates for all of these stages. Yeah, how to do discovery to find the real pain and the people that are really responsible to solve this pain. Yeah, how to do a tailored demo that allows you to go even deeper into this discovery, right, and impact for the company. And how do you trap out your competition? Next steps are efficient technical and commercial evaluation. And all of this is driven by your value framework because now you know which capabilities make your offer unique and how you can efficiently measure the success from both a technical and economic perspective. And that's then the key to really drive during the sales process. How can you build your champions? How can you open up the way to your economic buyer, who usually, as we said before, does not care about features and functionalities, right? They care about money, they care about profitability, risk reduction, and growth of the company. That's what they want to hear. And this is a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. I agree here, but it's the foundation for two continuous loops on top of that, right? You have this pipeline generation loop, what Sandra already mentioned. You will create inbound campaigns. You can feed your website content generation workflows. You can start to create tailored landing pages for specific personas, for ICPs. You can start to create thought leadership articles. And you can also use it in your outreach strategy, right, to identify the right target companies, create relevant pain hypothesis inside of these companies with the help of AI, grounded in your value framework. Yeah? All of this to find and address the right leads with the right messaging, grounded in this value framework you created. And another loop, after creating the pipeline, you need to move into a sales cycle. You start with persona and ICP specific meeting preparation here. So what are the questions that you need to ask? Where are qualification gaps that you need to close? And what is the right next step that I need to position to actually move the deal forward with very meaningful next steps here? And AI and a defined architecture, value architecture here, helps you a lot, right, to come up with laser sharp discovery, with personalized demos, crisp evaluations, and at the end of the day, fast deal closings. And the playbook should and must not stop here. You also must ensure successful onboarding of the first use case. Once you're in the company, make them successful, because this opens up the path for expansion in your customers, and obviously to transfer your champions into multipliers. Write a good case study with them, bring them to stage somewhere, use it in your next marketing campaign. Use it in your sales cycles, obviously, as good proof points where you have shown very specific outcomes. And if you really think this to an end, this is now the very big loop, you come up with a real continuous learning loop based on each and every single customer and prospect interaction. So this way you can really create a system with compounding effects. So this is key. You always need to learn, and learn, which must never ever stop. Once you think, oh, we did it, and some routine gets there, you're already late, right? You need to get back to this learning approach. And believe me, I've seen so many even printed value frameworks 10 years back. Powerful PowerPoints that I also created for sales enablement, or spreadsheets with a lot of capabilities that were not even completely filled. I did that myself. But it was not actionable, right? It was not in a tool. You could not use it in your AI helpers. You could not use it, or you always had to open up a book and you forgot it at home. And what was this key value driver again, right? And here with this ACT Playbook, we have a real piece of software created as the core and center of this system that enables this structured approach to real company-wide learning.
And I mean, we found this foundation. You've shown parts of it. We've talked about it. It is very detailed. It is a lot of work to put that together. But what we see is this really helps us to generate, also to use AI in a lot better way, because I mean, there's a lot of discussions out there on how good AI created content is, and there's a lot of complaints that like AI fatigue, that you see all those generic, obviously AI created posts out there. Um, from what I see, or my experience is that it doesn't have to be like this, because it really is about what is. I mean, we all know that the AI output can only be as good as the prompt is, and if each and every question and task you give to your AI has all this value framework as a foundation, the content and the results you see from there is completely different, because you're not just telling AI, can you please create a post on Greyd.Suite? I don't know, highlighting global content. Even if you get this in if you get this in just as a very basic prompt, the AI now knows with all your framework content in there. Okay, we're talking global content. Has all these capabilities, all these solves this and that pain for this person, for this ICP, and the content you get out there is amazing. I mean, one example that we did for earlier, we had like one demo video on our website, like again speaking to everybody at the same time, speaking to nobody, showing feature after feature. Okay, Greyd.Suite can do this, Greyd.Suite can do that. Now we are changing that to, okay, now we have actually, I think, 30 different demo videos on our website, and one demo video particularly for, I don't know, designers in franchise companies, explaining them exactly how we solve their pain points. And this is different content than the video that is created for C-level in franchises, because they want to hear different things. They care about different things. They have different pains. They have different KPIs they need to achieve. And you can really use AI for that if the foundation is there. Otherwise, again, we'll just end up with generic messaging.
Yeah. And now take this also to the next step. Imagine they saw a customized or persona-specific demo video. Now you have the first call of them and ask very specific questions, right? That even go deeper. And you can now show a more granular demo if it gets to this point, if it's a value or the right next step here, that can even influence, it's what I said earlier, this decision criteria, right? Maybe they don't know about your product and they don't know what you offer for them that can actually solve their pain that they have, right? And maybe they didn't even know, oh yeah, this is exactly my pain that I have. Thanks for pointing me to it, right? And thanks for peeling it out.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed this discussion. I think we could probably go on talking for hours. And I have a small hint that this might not be the last Greyd Conversations episode that is a little bit more sales focused. So however, for today, we are nearing an hour. So I think today it's time to wrap up. Is there anything else that you want to share that we haven't had the chance to mention today?
We covered a lot of ground, but I think the most important thing is do it, right? Get started and don't over-engineer it. One of the questions I hear most frequently is, why do I actually start with that? It's so much to do. Start at one point, go through it, continue. Don't give up.
I think this is advice that that is helpful for a lot of things in business and also in private. Just do it.
Exactly, yeah.
Christian, thank you very, very much for being on the show, sharing all this valuable insights and experience and learnings with us. We will, as always, put the links to the ACT Playbook and other things we discussed today in the description. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss on future episodes, sales-based or not. And of course, we will also continue sharing updates on our own progress related to the German Accelerator program on our channels. Thank you very much for tuning in today. And Christian, thank you very, very much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
See you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.